when you have faced the possibility of death, which is something that you do when you get diagnosed with cancer, you look at every single day differently. You start to appreciate the little things and the time, and you stop worrying so much about the smaller things.
Welcome back to Happiness and Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award winner, former journalist, mom, wife, and you know what I like to say? Just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest. You are going to meet Michelle Velez. She is a news anchor in Las Vegas. She is also the mom of two, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And just this last October, she was diagnosed with cancer. A cancer that came about because of a pregnancy. You're going to learn all about how that can happen. Michelle's also going to talk about being a mom and fighting cancer at the same time. You'll also learn about what she has learned about herself throughout this process. There's a lot of good in this conversation. And a big part of this for Michelle is raising awareness that this can happen. So if you like this conversation, please share and let's get to it. Michelle, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thank you so much. This is my first one, and I'm very happy to share my story.
Yeah. So one of the things that really hit me in all of your writing that I've seen is you talked about in this short amount of time, you went from a ton of joy expecting your third child to then miscarrying and then to hear those words, you have cancer. Tell me about that roller coaster of emotion. And was that in like 3-4 months time?
No, actually, it's only been 5 months since this whole thing happened to me. So that was just within a few weeks time. But it was early August, and we had kind of gone back and forth about whether or not we wanted to try. So we just decided to just see what happens, and it happened. And so we were really excited about it. And when I went in for the 6-week ultrasound, as soon as they popped it up on the screen, I knew right away that there was no baby inside, because this was my third one. I could see it was an empty gestational sac. So that was really upsetting. Doctor said it was just a typical early miscarriage, something called a blighted ovum, which I hadn't heard of, but it's where there's fertilization, but the baby never forms. So he said, I told him I really wanted to miscarry naturally if possible. And since it was so early, he agreed with me. So we decided to just give it a few weeks and then come back. But within a few weeks, instead of miscarrying, I started having more pregnancy symptoms. But at the same time, I was having bleeding. So I was not really sure what was happening. I had never had one before. So I thought maybe this is part of the process. Mm-hmm. But as time went on, it got worse and worse and worse. And I got to the point where I was severely sick, like to the point where, imagine the worst pregnancy symptoms you could imagine, like throwing up, sick all the time. And I was really fatigued, but the bleeding, the vaginal bleeding started to pick up. So I was thinking, okay, am I having a miscarriage or am I still pregnant? Mm-hmm. Like what is it?
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it was just really weird. And I had been pregnant twice before, so this had never happened before. And then when I went back to the doctor finally, because I was so ill, I could not function anymore. And I was still working. So I would still go in, I would still do the show. And every single day I didn't know if I was going to miscarry live while doing my newscasts. Mm-hmm. And in fact, one day I did have some heavy bleeding while I was sitting on the set.
Oh my gosh.
So it was just a really tough time. And when I went back, the doctor took one look at the screen of the ultrasound, and I saw it was this really weird kind of looked like a bunch of grapes, like a grape-like bunch mm-hmm. of little circles inside. And he asked me, how do you feel? And I said, I feel horrible. And he said, well, you're not having a miscarriage. You never had a miscarriage. You have a molar pregnancy. And when he said that, of course, I didn't know what he was talking about. I had never heard of it. So that was a whole new thing, because I didn't know what this was. And essentially it's where the placenta, instead of miscarrying naturally like it should, it starts to reproduce invasive tissue and
my
it
gosh.
starts to invade the uterus. And in some very rare cases, it can spread beyond the uterus. And then you need a type of chemotherapy called methotrexate, which doesn't necessarily mean you have the cancer. It just means that it's reproducing cells, which is what cancer is. And so you need methotrexate to stop that from happening. So the doctor had talked to me about this, and he said, we're going to do a D&C and evacuate the uterus. And then we're going to watch your HCG numbers, which is the pregnancy hormone in your blood, and it should drop. We want it at 0. When I was the sickest that I was, mine was 800,000.
Oh my gosh.
So that's like being pregnant with 5 or 6 babies at once, which was why I was so sick. So they decided to do the surgery and then watch the numbers go down. And as long as the numbers get down to 0, you have to monitor it for a whole year, which means you can't get pregnant for a whole year, which at the time was what I was most upset about because I wanted to have another baby.
But now you said at the time, so now you think back, if that was the worst case scenario, because soon you would find out you had cancer.
Right. So if only that was my biggest problem. But that unfortunately is not even at the top of the list anymore. So we did the surgery. The numbers went down at first, but then they started to go back up again. And that's when they sent me to the oncologist. And that was really hard for me because I was in denial. Like, what are you talking about? Why do I have to go to a cancer doctor? I don't have cancer. I have a pregnancy. Why am I all of a sudden at this oncologist's office? Which again, they're the ones who administer methotrexate. So that's what he told me. It's just because they're the ones that give the drug. But they did a scan just to be sure. And even the oncologist told me, we're not calling this cancer. It's just sometimes the tissue comes back and it's reproducing. So we're going to do a scan to double check everything. But you should, right now this is just a molar pregnancy, and we'll do another D&C and then we'll track your numbers. And then the next day I got a call that woke me up, and they said, you need to come in to talk about the scan. And I knew right then if it were good news, they wouldn't need me to come in. And so I came in and they sat me down, and they were even shocked, and they said it's stage 4 gestational trophoblastic neoplasia, which is a type of cancer that's very rare that you can get, and you have to start chemo immediately.
So when you're sitting there, the day before you're in denial, I don't even belong at the oncologist, the next day you find out you have cancer. What does that feel like? What goes through your head when you hear those words?
It's almost like I think the words that would describe it best is unbelievable and terrified. Those are the 2 words that I have been able to find to describe what it feels like to find out you have cancer, because it's like, especially the way that it doesn't matter how you find out. It doesn't matter if you have a history or if you never had a family history and this is a complete surprise, or if you got pregnant like I did and didn't even know that a pregnancy could cause cancer. It's just so shocking. And I instantly just cried. I just started crying. And at the time, actually, my husband was at work and my mom was flying in that night because I had scheduled another D&C for the next day. So my co-anchor, Crystal, actually left work to meet me there so that I wasn't alone. And if she hadn't done that, I would have gotten that news by myself. It was horrible. It was the worst day of my life. I still think about it a lot and think about what that was like and all the things that go through your mind. And especially when you're a mom of 2 young kids. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I'm thinking, I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. I need to be here for them. Mm-hmm. And it's just shocking.
I can't even imagine. When you think about the fact that your pregnancy caused the cancer, because I didn't realize that. And I think that's one of the great things about you speaking out about this, even when you feel awful, you're still telling your story so people can understand this. What are your thoughts about that? That the pregnancy, the thing that was going to bring you something you were so joyous about, instead brought you cancer. What are some of the thoughts you have about that?
Makes me mad.
Yeah.
That more people don't know about this. Not mad at anyone in particular, but just mad at the fact that that this could happen and no one's ever heard of it. People have heard of molar pregnancies. I've even found myself having to ask my nurses, and well, I've had several trips into the hospital since this whole thing happened for many different reasons. And sometimes I find myself asking them, are you familiar with molar pregnancy? Because when they ask what type of cancer I have, no one's ever even heard of it.
The nurses.
The nurses.
Unreal.
I mean, they've heard of molar pregnancies, but they learned about it like on their boards when they were taking their tests. It's so rare that it doesn't happen that often. But the thing about it is that it's not that rare, because 1 in 1,000 pregnancies end in a molar pregnancy. To me, that's not rare. To me, I mean, it's rare, but it's not that rare. That's a lot of people if you think about the whole world, right? But the cancer that affects people, that's much more rare. But you would not believe how many people have reached out to me and come into contact with me from all over the world saying that they've either had a molar pregnancy or that they had the cancer and that they didn't know anybody else knew what it was. And so for me, it kind of has helped give this whole journey a little bit of a purpose for me, sharing my story. I feel like I have a mission to make people aware of what this is. I feel like every woman who's of childbearing age and wants to have kids should at least know the signs and symptoms, because it's very sneaky, and a molar pregnancy can look like a pregnancy and act like a pregnancy, and then before you know it, it's it could get really bad, like it did with me.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that being able to speak about this and also have all of these other women come to you and say that happened to me too, that does that make any part of this a little bit easier, that you're not in it alone, that there's other people that have walked the same path?
Yes, it has helped me tremendously. It's almost been sort of a form of therapy. The social media for me has been very therapeutic, and you wouldn't even believe it, but a lot of men have reached out to me too, and their wives, their moms, their sisters, whomever it is that has been affected by this, have just told me, thank you so much for talking about this, because when we went through it, however many years ago, we didn't know anything about it. I've had women reach out to me who said they had it in the 60s and the 70s.
Oh my goodness.
Didn't know.
Wow.
And they had the cancer that came along with it. It's very confusing. Gestational Trophoblastic Neoplasia is kind of like an umbrella, and then underneath that are different types of tumors that you can have. So choriocarcinoma is one of the rare types of cancers that you can have. But once you have the spreading of it, that's when you have to get into the hardcore chemo. And it's been very helpful to hear other people's stories, because I'm thinking, well, if they survived it back in the 1960s, and it's a treatable type of cancer. Not everybody. It has a very good prognosis, which is the great news. It has a really good prognosis. It's very, very sensitive to chemotherapy. But there was a woman who just died from it. Actually, 2 women that we know of. We have a group on Facebook, and we've lost 2 women recently who died from this type of cancer.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I can't even imagine what it feels like to be someone who's supporting a group of women going through something similar and then hearing the news like that.
Yeah, it's hard and it's upsetting. And I think what's so upsetting about it is that, like you described, you go from this joyous occasion where you're expecting a baby, and then you also have that element to it as well. So there's different types, like I said. So not everybody didn't have, like for me, a fetus never formed, but there are women, it's called a partial molar, and their fetuses did form. And then they have to make a really difficult decision when it comes to the pregnancy or the mole. That's why it's called a molar.
Oh my goodness.
Kind
wow,
of
I didn't realize that.
Take over the baby. In their cases, there's been women who had a full pregnancy, delivered the baby, and then got sick after the fact, and then had a newborn, and they're going through cancer. It's really scary because it's so rare that there's just not a lot of information about it, and it's very, very sneaky.
Mm-hmm.
Very sneaky.
Oh, how does it make you feel that you can be kind of like a light to other people going through this, that they can come to your Instagram page and they can say, she's doing it, I can do it too?
It's been very helpful for me. I don't know. I never intended for it to kind of turn into that, but it just sort of did. It all happened while I was in the hospital. It was a one Yahoo writer who wrote one article about my initial post, and all I was doing was just letting everybody, all the viewers, know that this is why I had been missing. I had been on and off, because I was sick, and it's like you can hide a pregnancy for a little while. You can hide a miscarriage forever if you want, but you really can't hide cancer. That's just something that you can't really hide. And so I felt like people needed to know where I was going to be and why I was going to be gone. And then it just sort of kind of blew up into this great thing that has been so helpful for me. And knowing that it's helping other people has been really therapeutic for me. It kind of, I always say, I think everybody who gets cancer at one point or another asks, why me? Like, it's just the worst question ever, because there is no good reason for cancer. I mean, who knows why? But in my case, I feel like I kind of have this mission now to sort of connect with people and make people aware of what this is, and educate and help however I can and share my journey. And that's kind of given me a purpose, and it kind of answers that question just a little bit for me. It makes it a little bit easier for me to take the fact that I have cancer, knowing that at least I'm not alone, one, and two, that it's helping other people.
Wow, Michelle, your perspective there is amazing. Did you find yourself at any point asking that question, why me?
Oh yeah. And I still do. Oh, for sure. You have days where you feel like you can do it and you're going to be okay. And then you have other days where you just don't even want to get up out of bed, and you feel like, why did this happen to me? Like, for me too, what is hard. And I've been very honest and open about this. It's hard for me to see, it's not hard for me to see pregnant women or babies, but it's hard for me to think about where I would be at this point had my pregnancy not been cancer, but actually been a baby. I mean, I know when the due date was, and I know, how far along I should have been. And so that's difficult. And sometimes you'll find yourself saying, well, why did she get a baby and I got cancer? It's just part of the process,
When you get there mentally, do you just let yourself feel it, or do you try to get to the next feeling? I can't even imagine having to think about that. I've miscarried, and I've looked at people who had babies when I was going to have my baby, and I've had those feelings, but I cannot imagine adding cancer to the mix. I cannot imagine that.
It's weird because it doesn't make me upset. It's not hard for me to see other people's babies and talk about them, because I have two beautiful children, and I'm so thankful for that. And I kind of realized I need to be there for them. So for me, I just I've been learning to work through that process. You have to, it's a process, you have those feelings, and then they pass, and it ebbs and it flows. And I just try to roll with it and then try to move on. It's hard. Some days are really hard. This week has been a really hard week for me. I'll be honest. I had to take 2 weeks off of chemotherapy because my white blood cell count was too low. And so my body, I think, started to kind of detox. And then I got blasted again on Monday and Tuesday, and I had a really bad anxiety attack from it. And it was just like 3 days of horrible anxiety where I just was stressed out about everything. But I'm too fatigued to do anything, but I was too wired to focus on anything. There's so many weird side effects from chemotherapy. The chemo alone is a whole nother beast.
Yeah, right. I always say we need something better to treat cancer. We really do. So in all of this, when you look at this, what has been the hardest part for you?
Honestly, I think the hardest part is being a mom while doing this. I mean, aside from the initial finding out you have cancer and thinking you're going to die and dealing with all of those feelings. But once you kind of get past that and you sort of have a plan in place and you know what you need to do for your treatment, I try to imagine what it would be like to just be able to just go lay down and when I'm tired and not have to worry about the kids. And so it's been really hard. And my mom was here for most of the time. And my father-in-law is here now with me, but it's not the same because when you're home, your kids want you. And it's really hard to be a mom when you're going through really intense chemotherapy because some days you can't even move. And if you're a mom, you can't just like, whatever, go figure it out. You're 2 years old. I mean, they don't know the difference. Mm-hmm. So I think finding out that, the fact that it changes your life and all of that, you think losing your hair is going to be hard, and it is hard. But once you get past that, you realize that there's so much more to it. The mental and emotional side to this whole thing is so much harder than the physical effects too, because those come and go. But the mental and the emotional part of it is really what's hard to deal with.
Wow. What have you done as you've been doing these mental cartwheels? What is working for you?
Honestly, I haven't even had a chance to fully process it. I mean, it was October 10th when I was diagnosed, and I was in and out of the hospital. I've been in and out of the hospital 5 times since I got diagnosed, and we also had the holidays. And there's just been one thing after the next. So for me, I don't feel like I've had a chance to process all that. And I talked about this on Instagram just the other day. I'm a little bit nervous for what the journey is like after you're done with treatment, because everybody says after treatment's the hardest part because everyone thinks you're cured. You think you're okay, you're better now. And it's kind of like after losing somebody, everybody's there for you in the initial aftermath, but then everyone goes back to their lives and you're still stuck here with this, like, what the heck just happened to me? Look what I just went through. And again, the emotional and mental side effects of trying to live life after cancer and grow your hair back. What I hear can be really interesting process as well.
You look so beautiful. You are like the most beautiful woman who has had to shave her head I've ever seen. I mean, truly.
Oh, thank you.
I want to go back to motherhood. Have you seen your kids struggle seeing you sick? Are they old enough to understand anything that's going on?
My 4-year-old he knows I'm sick. And he is a pretty smart kid. Now I know all moms say that, but he's really sharp and he never misses a thing. So I don't know if you saw the video of when we shaved my head, but I did post that, and it was hard for him not really because I was losing my hair, but because he saw me cry for the first time. And he didn't really know why. Mommy, why is the water coming out of your eyes? That's what he was asking me. And he said, why is your face doing this? He was really concerned about me looking sad. So I've tried really hard not to let them see the really bad things, which is why we've had to make the really hard decision and have them go to Arizona, which is where our in-laws live. So they've spent a total, since this whole thing has started, I think it's 4 or 5 weeks that they've spent on and off with our in-laws. And I felt really guilty about that because I felt like I was sending my kids away, but I was really sick. I was in the hospital. I couldn't get out of bed. And I thought it's better that they're doing that than seeing me doing this. They don't really fully understand. I try to be really particular about the words that I use. So I never said the medicine makes my hair fall out. I say the medicine makes mommy's hair short. Or, mommy doesn't feel good. Mommy, the medicine, mom, he asked me the other day, why don't you pick me up from school anymore? And I said, well, because the medicine makes me too tired. But he said, but you drove to the store the other day. Well, you're right, but it's hard for me to put you in the car seat and strap you in really tight. And so my 2-year-old, she doesn't have any idea what's going on. So in that sense, I feel really lucky and blessed that at least they're young enough that they're not really going to remember it. And my husband keeps telling me that. He goes, "Do you remember any when you were 2 and 4?" He goes, "Cruz will remember little bits and pieces, but for the most part, he's not really going to remember the whole process of what this has been like for us."
It's probably something more like you're going to have to tell them the story of what
Yep.
happened. So when they are older, what is something you would want them to know about this journey for you?
I want them to know everything. I want them to know that eventually they will know what cancer is, and that cancer is bad and that people die from it. I'm really grateful that they don't know that yet, because most people hear cancer and they think death.
Mhm.
And I don't want my kids to. I'm just really glad that they're not at the age where they're going to be at school and people are going to be talking about it and they're going to come home to me and ask me, "Mommy, are you going to die?"
Mhm.
Um, but at some point, I do plan to share all of this with them. I think that's one really great thing about social media too. It's kind of like a digital journal, really, of what I've been going through, and I'll be completely honest with them because I want them to know that I got through it, and that I survived it, and that it doesn't always mean you're gonna die.
Mhm.
And I think that's you get the gasp. I call it the gasp when you tell
Ugh.
people that you have cancer. So we took a week to let all of our close friends and family know before I announced it publicly that I was diagnosed with cancer. And the first thing everyone does is gasp because it's cancer. And so everyone freaks out and thinks, "Oh my gosh, you're going to die." So it's really interesting. I mean, once you get past the shock of seeing the other side of it and what it's like to be on this side of it,
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
you've always been on the other side of it. You always knew
Right.
someone who had cancer, or you always knew of somebody who knew someone, but you having cancer, everything is a totally different perspective.
Even as a journalist, someone who has told countless stories of people who are going through the worst times of their lives, it must be really weird to be now on the other side.
Yes, and if I'm completely honest, every single person that I've ever done a story that involved cancer has since passed away.
Mm.
Every person that I've worked with personally as a journalist that I've done a story on who had cancer has passed away. Um, and that is something that I've had a hard time with. I'm not quite sure why. I think it's just because you know you hear all the bad stories and how serious and dangerous it can be. But to work so closely with people and then to lose all of them at some point or another, and then to be in those shoes yourself, it just really hits close to home, I guess you could say. It
Mhm.
just really is weird. It's really weird. And I've done a
Wow.
lot of interviews, and I'm not normally the one being interviewed. Um, but I want to talk about it. I feel like people should need to know.
I want to go back to your kids for a second. What do you want them to know about your resilience and your strength? That their mom was this person who fought this battle.
That there are going to be hard times in life, and there are going to be things that are really tough to get through. But my mom actually told me today on the phone, when you get through this, you're going to look back and you're going to realize that you got through that. Like, you can get through anything.
Mhm.
And I want to be able to tell my kids that as well. Like, if you can get through something like this, which just completely blows everything else out of the water that you've ever really worried about in your life. I mean, you look back at all the little trivial things and you think, "Gosh, I can't even believe I wasted energy worried about that." And ironically enough, I always worried I was going to get cancer. And I think that's just part of my job. My job makes me kind of a paranoid person. I'm also worried I'm going to get, hit by a car every day because I cover car accidents every day. But I just want the kids to know that they can get through anything. Um, no matter how hard it is, it's going to be hard, but you can do it. And we're also faith-based. So with God, for me, that has been kind of, my faith has really gotten me through a lot of this as well.
What have you learned about yourself?
That's interesting that you asked that question, because my husband and I were having a talk about this, and I told him one night, I don't think I'm that strong. Like, everybody keeps saying I'm so strong, but I think the only reason I've been able to feel so strong about this is because I know that I have a type of cancer that I can treat, or that we can treat. If I had gotten a different type of cancer that didn't have such a great prognosis, I don't know if I would have been this strong person. This is what I was telling him. And he said, see, I disagree. I think that this is bringing out the strengths that you didn't know you had. And I thought about what he said, and there are a lot of different ways you could look at this, right? I mean, there are, I call them the whole, like, going down the rabbit hole of darkness. There are a lot of those rabbit holes when you have cancer. There are so many different places that your mind can go. You have to have a lot of mind control. And for me, I literally, there's a verse that I rehearse over and over again when I first got sick, and I still do it to this day. And that's just what brings me comfort. But like this week, when my really bad anxiety, I literally had to say, Michelle, you are going to be okay. Like, you're going to be okay. And so sometimes I surprise myself with the mind control of being able to bring myself out of that darkness that you can go to so easily when you have cancer. It is, I mean, you think a rabbit hole, you wouldn't even believe where you can go when your mind starts to wander.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can imagine. And I think when I see you, I see someone really strong. I think when the people who are watching your story see you, they see someone strong. And I think sometimes we think a strong person is someone who's like choosing the battle. Like, you don't have a choice but to battle. But I think that the strength is moving forward each day and doing it. You're doing it.
Yeah, it is. It's very true, because some days you don't want to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if I'm being completely transparent, which is what I wanted to do, then I have to show those days as well. And I have those days. I just had a couple of those days earlier this week where I was freaking out. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. And I literally had to talk myself out of it and find that mind control. And even though you're surrounded by so many people, you never have felt more alone when you have cancer. It's a very lonely place.
I wish that we could keep talking for the rest of the day, because I adore you. I've adored you for so long. I love listening to your perspective, and I love how real you have been about this, and yet also so positive on the journey as well. I think it's incredible. The last question I want to ask you is, I ask it to everyone. Mm-hmm. This podcast is all about finding more joy, more happiness in the everyday, the good, the bad, and the in-between. What would you say is your key to doing that?
I think and I know this sounds so cliche, but it is so true when you're facing death. When you have faced the possibility of death, which is something that you do when you get diagnosed with cancer, you look at every single day differently. You start to appreciate the little things and the time, and you stop worrying so much about the smaller things, which is a lot coming from someone like me, because I have major anxiety and I worry all the time about everything. So it's kind of ironic and funny sometimes when we're feeling like joking that I actually got cancer, because I used to worry about it. I just think it's really important that you when you see somebody going through something like this, a lot of people have said to me, it's inspiring for me to carry on with my day, because just because you don't have cancer doesn't mean whatever it is that you're going through isn't hurtful or hard or difficult or stressful or making you anxious. But maybe when you see someone else going through something like this, it makes you realize if they can get through it, so can I. And that's kind of where I hope that this will lead. And then also to educate as many people as I can about molar pregnancies and this type of cancer and what women need to look out for.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for sharing my story. I really just hope that it can reach the right people and that it can help people, understand what this is and what we all need to look out for.
Thank you so much for listening. I, of course, will link all of Michelle's information. You can follow along with her journey. She is really, really open about it. I love how open and real she is being about this, that this is not a cakewalk. She's not sugarcoating it, but she also somehow is able to also have this beautiful, happy disposition and this positive perspective. It's really amazing to me. And with that, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for being here on Happiness in Progress.